In this video, we'll be looking at the bass saxophone, in my opinion one of the most useful woodwind instruments composers can write for. The bass saxophone is pitched in B flat, one octave below the tenor sax. It is written in the treble clef, like all saxophones, and has a range from concert A flat 1 upwards for roughly 2.5 octaves. Very good players can of course go higher, as on any other saxophone. There are some one-off models of bass sax which descend below written bottom B flat, but these are usually custom built for particular players and definitely not commonplace, so we should always assume that the instrument's lowest note is written B flat. The inventor of the saxophone, Adolf Sax, strove to create a new bass instrument designed to provide substantial support to the orchestral woodwind section. At the time he was developing the saxophone, the contrabassoon was of more dubious quality compared to the sophisticated modern instruments we see and hear now, and it was felt that the bassoon was not able to provide enough of a satisfactory bass to the woodwind section in the ever-expanding orchestras of the early to late Romantic periods. The bass sax is sometimes called the original saxophone. Sax toured Europe with it in the 1840s, extolling the many virtues of his invention: its ability to blend extremely well with other instruments, be as agile as other woodwinds, and yet at the same time have sufficient power to reinforce orchestral tutties. Subsequently, of course, the saxophone family expanded to encompass all the many sizes that we're familiar with today. Berlioz was very complimentary of the saxophone in general, writing in a journal article from 1842 that its sound is of such rare quality that there is not a bass instrument in use nowadays that could be compared to the saxophone. His orchestration book then continues this praise with, "These newly gained orchestral voices have rare and valuable qualities. Saxophones can be used in any kind of music." The bass sax is a highly versatile instrument and should definitely not be relegated to playing bass lines using just a couple of notes. It can do a lot more than that. The bass sax has appeared in a handful of orchestral works written in the 19th century. The Last King of Judea by Kastner from 1844 is often thought to be one of the first examples of a saxophone appearing in a large-scale score. This includes a part for bass sax in C. It is interesting that Kastner places the bass sax where the tuba would normally be in the score, at the bottom of the brass section. However, he does use it in conjunction with the low woodwind during the piece as well. The bass sax then featured in a handful of other operas and orchestral works from the 19th century. It then enjoyed a heyday in the 1920s, particularly due to the efforts of Adrian Rollini, who became something of a superstar on the instrument, demonstrating its flexibility in jazz. However, by the 1930s and the Great Depression, the bass sax began to fall out of use, and sadly became more uncommon and remained as such for several decades. Nevertheless, a number of band composers in the early to mid-20th century, such as Percy Grainger and Warren Benson, were strong advocates of using the bass sax in their compositions, and championed its importance in band music. Around this time, the bass sax also appeared in the reed parts of musicals, two notable examples being The Music Man and West Side Story. Naturally, the bass sax is very much at home in a saxophone choir, where it supplies a solid foundation for the higher saxophones and can work in tandem with a contrabass saxophone if one is present. The bass sax is an effective addition to any non-classical ensemble too, just as it is a band or orchestra. In this excerpt, the bass sax is the primary colour providing the bass line. Adding the string bass gives more punch to the notes. Later, when the harmony changes, the piano doubles the bass line in unison too, resulting in a hybrid timbre with a strong percussive quality. The uneven 3-bar phrase of this bass line also helps provide a bit of extra momentum. A saxophone quartet's sound can be transformed if each player plays on one sax lower, so alto, tenor, baritone, bass. The sound is mellow, yet much darker, and creates a noticeable contrast to the standard sax quartet setup of soprano, alto, tenor, baritone. More players are using the bass sax in jazz, and younger players are being exposed to the instrument's capabilities, so as a result the bass sax is finding more favour and use in general. Excellent. Let's look at how to write for the bass sax. The bass sax can do pretty much anything that the baritone sax can do. Naturally, there will be slightly less agility due to its size, but that doesn't mean a composer can never write fast passages for it. It also possesses a wide dynamic range across each register. The lowest register is very strong with a full tone. In my first symphony for band, there is a long bass sax solo at the start of the first movement. I had thought long and hard about which instrument should play this melody when I was sketching the piece. Ultimately, there was only one option. The contrabass clarinet or contrabassoon didn't feel right, and neither did a solo tuba. The bass sax simply produced the sound I was after, and in doing so, it sets off the 15-minute movement by presenting the primary melodic material against a backdrop of dovetailed pedal tones and sustained percussion, whilst at the same time showing its capacity of being at once expressive, mysterious, lugubrious, and declamatory in tone. In my cantata Night Journey for band and choir, the bass sax can clearly be heard at the start of the second movement, adding much depth to the bass line when combined with the other woodwind, whilst the low brass are silent. In its middle register, the bass sax can be used in a cantabile style, just like any other saxophone. In the seventh movement of Night Journey, the bass sax has a short solo in duet with the male vocal soloist. The soft velvety background of horns allows the sax tone to project. The highest I have written for the bass sax is D-flat 6, sounding C-flat 4. I had no complaints from the player, and the note came out perfectly with no issues. However, it would be advisable to consult a player if you want to write significantly higher than this. The English composer Joseph Holbrook scored for the bass sax in a couple of his works. In The Serenade for 12 Instruments, the bass sax fulfills a couple of roles. Firstly, it is used like a substitute contrabassoon or double bass, reinforcing the lowest pitches that are played by the harp, almost simulating the effect of a piano's sustain pedal. Later on, the bass sax plays a very expressive melodic figure in octaves with the tenor sax, before playing in octaves with the four other saxophones, creating a very homogeneous and rich sound. In a similar vein, Holbrook's orchestral tone poem The Children of Don employs a section of 5 saxophones, the bass being one of them. In this piece, he uses the bass sax in a variety of ways. First, he uses it to blend with the lower strings to give more breadth in tone. Secondly, the bass sax thickens the tone in pizzicato passages and provides a strong front to those pitches. Thirdly, it almost acts like a fourth trombone, doubling the low brass to add more power in the orchestra's bass register. And finally, Holbrook uses the bass sax to blend with the bassoons and contrabassoon to colour an active bass line in the woodwind section. Extended techniques work very well on the bass sax as on any other saxophone. Slap tongue is particularly effective due to the instrument's size, but this can get tiring for the player and also the listener if used for very prolonged periods, but it is still a very good effect when used in the right way. Let's look at the bass sax's role in band music. The woodwind section of the modern wind band is often thought by many to be unbalanced at the bottom end. For most bands, their bass section consists of one or maybe two bass clarinets, two bassoons, and a baritone sax. Added to this, we will hopefully see a contrabassoon and maybe a contralto or contrabass clarinet. In an ideal situation, we should find all of these aforementioned instruments in a band. When a bass sax is added, the low end of the woodwind choir is strengthened considerably and is much better balanced as a whole. The advantage of adding a bass sax to a band is that it frees up the baritone sax for more melodic and inner harmony roles. The middle to upper register of the baritone sax is a really beautiful colour, which only tends to get exploited in jazz or a handful of concerti that have been written for it in recent years. Too many band composers have not taken advantage of this register of the baritone sax. A sax section that is augmented by a bass sax means a composer can take the pressure off the baritone sax player from playing down in its bottom octave all the time, whilst at the same time the ensemble benefits from an additional deep and sensitive melodic voice in the bass sax.
Not a bad idea, that.
Some band composers still doggedly avoid writing bass sax parts in their works because they think it's too rare, but really they shouldn't. There are more bass sax players now than ever before, and of course those players want to use their instruments. Intonation is not really an issue I've encountered when writing for the bass sax. Players who own one treat it with a lot of care, like any musician would treat their instruments, so consequently they are very well maintained. If all composers keep writing bass sax parts, then it will encourage more instruments to be available to a wider range of players.
That'd be sweet!
It is encouraging that the bass sax has been experiencing something of a recent revival. More saxophonists are using it, and there is a small but growing repertoire for the bass sax, with even a couple of concerti being written for it. One thing I have noticed is that the bass sax is never seen as a pointless or useless instrument. Instead, it's simply perceived as a cool instrument which happens to enter the spotlight occasionally. I see no reason why the bass sax can't be included in orchestral or chamber music. It seems a real shame to exclude its use completely. So I would say definitely write for the bass sax, whether it be in a band, orchestra, a chamber ensemble, duet with piano, or a solo work. It is a unique sound. Berlioz said it was magnificent and profound. Once you've heard a wind band with a bass sax, and then hear the same band without one, its absence is very obvious. Even if you were to include a part for bass sax in your latest masterpiece for band, and the band giving the premiere does not have one, a second or third performance might be given by a different band which does have access to a bass sax, so it's absolutely worth scoring for it. The bass sax's versatility, strength, capacity for expression and wide range make it a really useful additional colour for any composer in any genre. So, do you think there should be more solo repertoire for bass sax? Have you composed a part for bass saxophone in an ensemble piece? Are you a sax player who plays bass sax? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening everyone. Please like, comment and subscribe.